When German intelligence first heard whispers of a new British fighter outrunning their best machines at low altitude, they assumed it was a misunderstanding. But the Hawker Tempest wasn't a rumor, it was a shockwave headed straight for the Luftwaffe. What Germany discovered over the next months changed the war's air combat landscape completely. If this grabs your attention, wait until you hear what had German commanders genuinely nervous. The first Luftwaffe reports in early 1944 sounded impossible. Pilots returning from missions near France described a British aircraft accelerating away from FW-190s at altitudes where German fighters traditionally dominated. Intelligence officers dismiss these accounts, attributing them to misidentification or pilot stress. In their view, Britain simply lacked the engineering bandwidth to produce another cutting-edge fighter while mass-manufacturing Spitfires and Typhoons. But as sightings increased, the pattern became harder to ignore. Bf-109G pilots diving from altitude reported being overtaken, an unheard-of scenario. The silhouette didn't match the elliptical Spitfire nor the streamlined Mustang. Instead, pilots described a large fuselage, a chin radiator, and wings thicker than expected for a high-speed interceptor. German analysts tried matching the profile with known RAF prototypes, but nothing aligned. By mid-May, the reality began to sink in. Oberst Josef Pips Priller, one of the Luftwaffe's most respected fighter commanders, delivered a blunt assessment after a near-fatal encounter. The Tempest was faster at operational altitudes, carried enough firepower to tear aircraft apart in seconds, and, crucially, could disengage at will. This last point shattered long-held German assumptions. Luftwaffe doctrine relied on German fighters dictating when to fight and when to escape. The Tempest flipped that advantage entirely. Command staff suddenly faced a threat with no tactical counter. They couldn't redesign their fighters mid-war. They couldn't retrain pilots overnight. And every day they delayed acknowledging the Tempest's existence meant another unit walked into combat unprepared. Yet as alarming as these early encounters were, Germany had not yet understood just how disruptive this aircraft would become. Something far worse was about to expose the Luftwaffe's vulnerabilities in ways they hadn't imagined. Subscribe for more deep-dive aviation history. Germany believed the V-1 flying bomb would break British morale. The pulse-jet missile flew low, fast, and erratically, ideal conditions to evade interception. Early projections estimated that most V-1s would reach London unhindered, but once Tempest squadrons were assigned to V-1 defense, that confidence collapsed almost immediately. The Tempest's speed at treetop level over 400 miles per hour gave RAF pilots a margin no other Allied fighter could match. Instead of barely catching V-1s, they overtook them. That margin allowed Tempest pilots to maneuver alongside the missiles, line up shots, and destroy them without dangerous overcorrections. Gun camera footage recovered by German intelligence confirmed the grim truth. The Tempest made V-1 interception not just possible, but methodical. Between June and September 1944, Tempest units destroyed hundreds of V-1s, more than any other Allied aircraft. This wasn't luck or isolated success. It was system failure for Germany's wonder weapon strategy. German engineers watching the footage noted the closing speeds and stability. Their calculations showed an uncomfortable reality. The V-1 was designed assuming Allied fighters lacked the capability to catch it at sea level. That assumption was now obsolete, and the psychological impact inside the Luftwaffe was immense. V-1s had been conceived as a strategic equalizer, a way to strike cities while Germany fought a defensive war. Instead, the Tempest neutralized them like clay pigeons. Officers reviewing loss statistics admitted privately that the campaign was becoming a resource drain rather than a breakthrough. But the Tempest's role in killing V-1s wasn't its most frightening capability. German pilots were about to discover something far more humiliating, because the aircraft they believed to be the future, their jet fighters, were about to face the Tempest in conditions that exposed their most dangerous weaknesses. By late 1944, German morale depended heavily on the promise of jet fighters. The Me-262 and He-162 were meant to redefine air combat. Their speed advantage was dramatic on paper, over 500 miles per hour, far beyond what piston fighters could theoretically match. Luftwaffe pilots believed that once in a jet, they would finally regain the initiative in the skies. But in actual combat, reality played out very differently. Jet fighters struggled during takeoff and landing phases, where they operated below 300 miles per hour, right inside the Tempest's performance sweet spot. RAF squadrons quickly learned to patrol near known jet bases, waiting for these exact moments. When Me-262s attempted to accelerate off the runway, Tempests swooped in before the jets could gain enough speed to escape. Gun camera records showed jets destroyed within seconds of attempting to climb out. German debriefs were startlingly honest. Some pilots admitted they felt more vulnerable in jets than in piston fighters because Tempests stalked the transitional phases of flight. Others complained that even once airborne, the slow throttle response of jet engines made evasive actions nearly impossible. A Tempest could dive, fire, and pull away before a Me-262 pilot could react. The psychological blow was profound. Germany had marketed the Me-262 as proof of technological dominance. Yet a piston fighter built in British factories was shattering that image every time a jet failed to reach combat altitude. Internal memos urged new defensive tactics, but resources were already stretched thin, and jet bases remained predictable targets. Still, Germany hadn't seen the most demoralizing revelation. A captured Tempest would soon give German engineers an inside look at its construction, and what they found dismantled any remaining hope that the Luftwaffe could compete. Subscribe for more deep-dive aviation history. When a relatively intact Hawker Tempest Mk crash-landed in occupied France in August 1944, the Luftwaffe treated it like a treasure. The fighter was immediately shipped to Rechlin, Germany's premier testing facility, where engineers expected to find a conventional British airframe with incremental upgrades. Instead, they encountered a masterpiece of wartime engineering that Germany could not replicate, not even with its most advanced research teams. Their first shock came from the Napier Sabre engine. German engineers were stunned by its H-24 configuration, 24 cylinders arranged in two stacked flat 12 banks. The sleeve valve system eliminated traditional poppet valves, allowing higher RPM, lower vibration, and exceptional airflow efficiency. Germany had explored sleeve valve concepts, but abandoned them as too complex for mass production. Yet Britain not only perfected them, they were manufacturing thousands. The Sabre's output of over 2,180 horsepower left German engineers quietly astonished. Next came the materials analysis. Metallurgists discovered high-grade chromium-molybdenum steels, advanced aluminum alloys, and precision bearings unavailable to German factories due to resource shortages and Allied blockades. Germany simply didn't have access to the quantity or purity of metals needed to build something comparable. Then there was the manufacturing precision. The Tempest's wing ribs and spars were machined to tolerances so tight that Germany's wartime factories, already dispersed, bombed, and lacking skilled machinists, couldn't approach them. Even the control surfaces showed advanced fabric techniques German analysts described as beyond current mass production capability. The final report, 127 pages long, ended with a single devastating conclusion. Germany could not reproduce the Tempest in less than 18 to 24 months. even under ideal industrial conditions, and 1944, Germany was anything but ideal. The war would be over long before a German equivalent could enter mass production. What the Luftwaffe didn't expect was that this technical defeat would soon turn into something far worse, a realization that Britain wasn't just ahead in engineering, but in production scale itself. The engineering analysis alone was demoralizing, but the real panic began when German intelligence evaluated British production numbers. The Tempest wasn't a rare high-performance prototype. It was being built in staggering quantities. Britain was producing over 100 Tempests a month, while simultaneously manufacturing Spitfires, Mosquitoes, and Lancasters at rates Germany could only dream of. Years of Allied bombing were supposed to cripple British industry. German strategic planners believed Britain was straining just to keep up. Instead, intelligence officers now faced hard data. Britain was producing more aircraft at higher quality, using materials Germany no longer had, and doing it all with an industrial base that seemed almost untouched compared to the devastation inside the Reich. Germany's material shortages made matters worse. Nickel, chromium, tungsten, and high-quality aluminum alloys were all restricted or depleted. Even if German engineers could design a Tempest-class fighter, they had no metals capable of sustaining the stresses involved. Meanwhile, Britain's global supply chains, backed by Allied naval control, guaranteed a steady flow of critical resources. The workforce situation was equally bleak. Britain retained a stable, skilled manufacturing labor force. Germany had lost tens of thousands of machinists, welders, and technicians to conscription, factory bombings, and forced relocation. What remained were undertrained workers in dispersed, improvised facilities, exactly the opposite of what high-precision aircraft production required. The Luftwaffe's economic analysts eventually admitted the unthinkable. Britain's aviation industry was now superior in scale, materials, precision, and logistics. The Tempest wasn't just a better fighter, it was proof that Germany had already lost the industrial war. But one final realization was still to come, because even Germany's most advanced late-war fighter projects couldn't alter what the Tempest revealed about their collapsing air strategy. By the beginning of 1945, the Luftwaffe's decline was no longer a gradual slide. It was a freefall, and the Hawker Tempest stood at the center of that realization. German commanders had long understood that superior technology alone could not guarantee victory. But the Tempest showed something far more alarming. Germany no longer possessed the industrial power, strategic flexibility, or pilot capability to regain control of the skies. Every major Luftwaffe weakness converged in the face of this single British fighter. German tactical doctrine had always relied on altitude advantage and speed control. Fighters like the Bf-109 and Fw-190 were designed to dictate engagements, diving into combat and climbing away before enemy aircraft could respond. But the Tempest negated this foundation. Its acceleration at low altitude, combined with its rugged airframe and heavy armament, allowed RAF pilots to decide not only how combat began, but how it ended. For the first time, German fighters could neither reliably escape nor effectively counterattack below 15,000 feet. Even Germany's advanced aircraft offered no solution. The TAR-152H performed brilliantly at high altitude, but the Tempest dominated the low-level environment where most real combat occurred. The Do-335 was fast on paper, but existed mostly as prototypes. The He-162 and Me-262 arrived too late, with too few trained pilots and too little fuel to matter. The Luftwaffe's late-war innovations looked impressive, but they weren't operational in the numbers or conditions required to change battlefield outcomes. The pilot situation made everything worse. Britain continued producing experienced aviators with 250 to 300 hours of training, While Germany, crippled by fuel shortages, rushed programs, and relentless losses, graduated new pilots with barely a third of that experience. Many Tempest pilots had years of combat behind them. Many German replacements had never fired their weapons in real engagements before being thrown into battle. The result was predictable. Even when German fighters were theoretically capable of matching Tempests, the crews flying them could not. With airfields destroyed, fuel reserves collapsing, and production crippled by Allied bombing and material shortages, the Luftwaffe no longer had the ability to sustain a meaningful defense. Tempests roamed the battlefield with near impunity, escorting bombers, hunting vehicles, intercepting V-1s, and stalking jets. Germany's final tactical directives admitted the truth outright: avoid combat with Tempests unless unavoidable. For a military built on offensive air doctrine, this was nothing short of surrender. Yet for all the Tempest revealed about Germany's tactical weaknesses, its most devastating impact lay elsewhere, because the fighter exposed a deeper, irreversible truth about the war that no technological breakthrough could fix. Germany's reaction to the Hawker Tempest revealed more than fear. It exposed a collapsing aviation system struggling to match an enemy, advancing faster than they could adapt. From V-1 interception to jet kills to engineering superiority, the Tempest forced Germany to confront limits they could no longer overcome. If you want more untold stories like this, keep watching our channel's videos. We've lined up more extraordinary history waiting for you.